top 10 richest countries which got bankrupt. Did the richest countries in the world have a spending problem? Or did their demands increase by tenfold? Click to find out. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel, The Real Luxury Affair. Well, being rich may be a luxury, but staying rich is work. Everything falls apart eventually. The wealth you have will be of no use one day, and the slogans of being broke may only be a good old memory in later years. But what about the countries that had the status of being the richest ones in the world, yet they fall down so hard that they eventually faced bankruptcy? It's definitely not a pretty sight, but let's see who had the privilege of making it to the list. Before we start, let's discuss bankruptcy. What is it? You must have heard a lot about it in recent years. The world may be focused on the BTS breaking up or the concurrent Oscar drama, but there are real-life dramas happening all over the world. After COVID, many countries had to face bankruptcy. This is the process when a government is unable to pay its dues. This situation occurs when you take a debt but are unable to pay it in foreign currency back to the International Monetary Fund. Usually there are two types of debt, internal and external. The one we just talked about is the external funds that determine whether or not you are in bankruptcy, or the most appropriate word, default. The other kind is the internal kind, which is taken from the country and can be managed through taxes. Now you might think that when a country goes bankrupt, it does not have any chance of coming back, but you would be surprised to hear that many governments in past years have fallen into bankruptcy not once, but 8 times. You would think that they would learn. But almost every era with a new political leader makes you realize that maybe nobody learns. Anyway, let's start with some of the richest countries that had to face the consequences of being bankrupt. Number 10 on our list, Iceland. The 3 largest banks in Iceland grew 10 times bigger and offered their country a rich platform. But eventually they faced a downhill fall when these banks started making bad decisions. They started investing in foreign companies and foreign football teams, leaving nothing in their credit. By 2008, they had a debt that was 10 times higher than Iceland's GDP. And by the way, we mean real football. The one that's considered football all over the world, yeah. The country fell into a great recession. Their economy started decreasing continuously in the next 2 years by 10%. Yes, they must have liked the number 10 a bit too much and a bit too less. But they have recovered since then. 9. Argentina. The country with one of the most successful players in football went bankrupt in the year 2001. I just had to mention that fact for some reason. Don't ask. They faced a whopping debt of $145 billion. That is huge. But the country faces this problem due to several bad decisions and issues. The biggest of their problems was corruption, which led to bad policy making. They suffered a lot economically when they could not pay back $100 billion as debt. Their unemployment rate had surged by 20% and people were going into crisis. The country eventually got back on track, but again faced the same issue in 2016. 8. Russia. Russia is the biggest country in the world with various resources of oil, apart from the Middle East reserves. And it's faced bankruptcy quite a number of times too. 9 to be specific. Surprising, isn't it? But here's another surprising fact. This is not the highest number of times a country has gone bankrupt. Yes, digest that. In 1998, it faced its most recent economic crisis. The ongoing Asian financial crisis and the whole oil demand put the country under a toll. They faced a debt of $17 billion and could only return $10 billion to the IMF. Their unemployment rate had declined by 13%, and inflation had increased by 80%. It was a nightmare, but the country eventually recovered. 7. Mexico. Everybody knows Mexico. Some of you may make fun of it, while others have a deep connection with it. Nonetheless, both parties enjoy its spicy food. But the country faced huge troubles in its history. The Mexican currency had depreciated by a whopping 50%. Considering other countries' bankruptcies, it doesn't feel too high, but the country was unable to pay back its debt to the US and the IMF, heading quite fast to its default. Apart from the worsening economic conditions, they also faced problems with the demand for oil. This led the government to make unpopular decisions. Eventually, the country faced one of its worst times for the next 5 years. Its GDP fell by 11%. 6. Lebanon. Lebanon is a country in the Middle East, and its crisis is fairly new. Their issues started in early 2019, and they faced bankruptcy in the year 2020. It all started when the government imposed taxes on WhatsApp calls. It created an uproar in the country among all classes, and the backlashes started. They had one of the biggest debts in the world, around $90 billion. This was the equivalent to 170% times their GDP, which is the highest in the world to date. Their currency depreciated 90% over time. They are known to have suffered the worst economic crisis in the world in centuries, over 150 years to be specific. 5. Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is the hub of coffee, but the country where coffee is cultivated is not facing its best time right now. The most recent example of bankruptcy in Sri Lanka, the Prime Minister accepted the bankruptcy and his parliament was soon attacked by a mob of angry people. The community there does not have the basic necessities. They neither have paper nor something to eat and complete their days in peace. They owe a debt of $51 billion to foreign parties. They have been negotiating with the IMF, but there are no signs of recovery as of yet. 4. Japan. Today, Japan holds quite a significant place in the world. It is one of the biggest countries to promote technology and has the latest advancements released almost every month. But back in 1991, it faced a very big economic crisis. It may have come out of bankruptcy, but it has not come out of paying its debt, nor has it decreased over the past years. They currently have trillions of dollars in debt, which is 266% more than its GDP. It is one of the highest debts for a developed nation, but the banks have taken over and have saved it from suffering a major crisis. 3. Germany. Today, people from all over the world prefer Germany as their next step in education, mainly because they offer free tuition. But that was not the case for the country long ago. Germany faced its biggest economic crisis in the year 1931. Eventually, this recession was part of the Great Depression that people still talk about today. The recession was triggered due to one of the biggest banks in Germany. With the Second World War and other crises, the country also had billions of dollars increasing in its debts. It took more than 92 years for the country to come out of this depressing situation of paying debts. 2. The U.S. The United States, one of the most developed countries, has gone bankrupt around 5 times. But in 1933, the country faced its most recent bankruptcy. They had a lot going on that year. A lot of policies and decisions were made behind the curtain, which meant that the public knew nothing about the whole situation. The bomb of bankruptcy was thrown onto them in the year 1933. In the end, the old was traded in exchange for notes, which did not help much, but it did delay the payment of debts. This allowed the country to somewhat get back on its tracks from the crisis. And number 1, the UK. The UK has gone bankrupt 8 times. The worst crisis was during World War II. They had taken so many loans that their debt had increased 200 times more than its GDP. Many of its loans were paid in the 21st century, so the whole fiasco went on for centuries. They had a debt of $21 billion by the end of the war, and in 2006, near the end, they made their final payment and got off the loans that were on their heads for all these past years. So that was our list of the top countries which faced bankruptcies. It is surprising how the developed nations had to go through multiple defaults to eventually find their way back on track. But you can't deny the fact that they could have avoided these. Yes, most countries could have avoided making bad decisions, But the developed nations mostly went bankrupt because of their ill desire to take part in wars. Anyway, that's all from our side. Forgive us if we made any mistakes. Let us know in the comments and we'll try to fix it. If you liked the video, hit the button, and if you wish to keep seeing videos like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. The bell icon will surely keep you updated with our latest uploads. Until we meet again, goodbye, take care, and be kind.